Hi, this is Martin from Revelation Software, and welcome to another video in my series which is looking at getting started with OpenInsight. In this particular video we're going to be looking at creating a new application in OpenInsight. So let's go ahead and run OpenInsight now. And we're prompted for a login for the examples application. That was the last one that we were working in. I don't want to use that, so we'll cancel, file, open application, and the one I want to open is the sysprog application. Now this is the main system application in OpenInsight, and that then launches the new IDE. I'm just going to flick over to the old IDE, which was the one that we were using in the previous lessons, and if I go to File, New Application, I'm prompted for information about my new app. Now if I was to put numbers in here, you'll notice that the boxes stay grey. They're greyed when you have an illegal name. So if I was to call my application Clinic, then that's fine. If I put a space and then some more letters, again, you'll see the title has gone greyed out because you're not allowed to have spaces. So you know that you've got a legal name when you can go ahead and put a title in. Now our title is going to be simply my Clinic application. You could put whatever you want in there. And the username, now in my applications, because they're not real-world applications, I tend to keep my username the same as the application. It's easy to remember, and I don't bother having a password. In the real world, remember we're setting up an administration level user here. In the real world, you'd never do this. So you just need to think about your usernames and your passwords a little bit more carefully than I do. Put your company in, and the next thing we need to do is to look at the inheritance. Now, inheritance is a slightly misleading name in this context. It isn't really about inheritance, it's about which application you want to use as the template for your application that you're creating. Whichever application you choose, the new application will have available to it all of the entities in that application that it inherited from. And by extension, all of the entities in the application that that application inherited from. So you've got this tree and the inheritance goes down. However, if you modify an entity in an inherited application, it will no longer reflect subsequent changes in the base entity in the parent application. So that's something you really need to remember when you're doing this. Now this can be useful when deploying specialty modules. For instance, you could develop a master clinic application and then inherit from that for each specialty application you require. So you might have a master one, somebody comes along and says, I really like your application, but I'd like to have this and this and this. Well, you can create them their own special copy of the application with their own changes, and you know that everything will be okay going forwards. So it follows then that the new application would have available to it all of the master clinic applications entities, and the extra speciality application will have all of the entities that are added to it at that level. In this instance, we're going to go for the default inheritance, meaning sysprog. So everything that we do, we're going to have access to the sysprog entities, which are the system-wide components in OpenInsight. Now the last button here is the abstract button, and we can click the abstract button and we can just go in here and put some information. So this is a tutorial application for my OI Quick Start Guide video series. You can put whatever you want in here, and we'll click OK. And once we're done, we just simply click OK, and OpenInsight will go away and complete the application for you. The new IDE is returned in this particular instance, and you can see at the top here that we've now got the OpenInsight version number. I am working with 9.2. This window hasn't yet been updated. It will when obviously we get the commercial release. But it's also got the name of our application that we're working in this instance, Clinic. So at this point, you've actually created your first application very quickly, very easily, and we're ready now to go forward and build the application further. Okay, some of you will have noticed on the taskbar that there are a number of other windows, one of which is the Open Engine window. Now normally you won't do anything in here, but there's a button for the debugger. Now the debuggers are very technical and powerful set of tools that helps developers to debug their code, and we'll probably have a look at that later on when we start building some code within the system editor. It also includes some engine info, This contains information such as the version, the user count, network information, application information, etc. You also have the ability to start a log, and when you start the log it will log all of the system processes, and then obviously when you stop the log it will stop them. So if we start one now, you'll see that it's now logging. We can stop the log and then you can review the log. Obviously I haven't made any changes, there's nothing to log in there, but if we wanted to we could do that. And there's also a mode button which simply minimizes this just down to the single line. Normally you'd have that mode open. So the Open Engine tab is really something that you would normally just be running in the background. You wouldn't need to worry about that very much. So we'll just minimize that for now. Before we go on to create our first data table, I want to just take a few minutes just looking at the repository outline. Until now, the different parts of our application have been referred to as components, forms, procedures, scripts, etc. As we work through this tutorial, they will continue to be called by their more descriptive names as it makes life easier. However, when we are talking about the repository, we refer to them all under the single collective title of entity. Now if I navigate down to, let's say, a bitmap entity, this 100% page, and open up the properties, you can see here the entity name. Now this follows a specific format, which is application name, in this instance clinic, the repository type, which is image, the entity class, which is bitmap, BMP, and the entity name, so 100% page. Now that tends to be the normal format, however that isn't always the case. For instance, if I come out of here, just minimize this and go into the OpenInsight executables and I look at a form, and this happens to be the app backup form, you'll notice here that the entity is now an application name, the repository type, and the actual entity name itself. There's no class. So not all entity types have an entity class, and that's worth remembering. Remember, for ease of use, all entities are displayed in the repository and the application manager window using their more generic type name. So in this particular instance, form executables, you've also got store procedures, etc.